And we're live. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. We are here once again on The Future Of, and today's topic is the future of culture and politics. We'll get into what that means exactly in a moment, but I think first I want to introduce my very special guest. I am so stoked. Today I have Kathy Shaidle, who is a movie columnist for Steyn Online, the very celebrated and famous website of the columnist Mark Steyn. And Kathy, I'm going to seem, like this is going over the top, but I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while because I read your columns all the time.
Oh, thank you. Thanks very much.
So I wanted to, you're someone who for many people will need no introduction, but maybe for some you will. So no one's going to give a better introduction than yourself.
Yeah.
So.
No pressure.
Yeah. So go right ahead. Why don't you fill us in on what you have been up to and what your origin story is?
Okay, well, I'll try to make it short. I know we're going to be talking about movies today, and I guess my particular circumstances brought me to where I am now. I grew up in Hamilton. I was born there in 1964, and it just so happened that in the apartment building that we lived in, we were a block away from what used to be the Pussycat, which was a porn theater. And then it got bought out and became what's called a rep cinema. And a lot of people out there under a certain age aren't even going to know what I'm talking about. But there was a golden era there when, at least here in Toronto, there was the Bloor and the Roncy and the Roxy and places where you could go before the invention of VHS, let alone DVDs, and see Casablanca or see a foreign film. And so I was a block away from there when it transitioned over, and I spent an awful lot of my adolescence going down there to see Fellini movies and bizarre British films. And I was also lucky because at the time, City TV, under Moses Neimer's hand, would do things like show Taxi Driver at 11:30 at night, a few years after it came out, or the Lindsay Anderson trilogy with If, about a bunch of kids who shoot up their British public school, and just bizarre, crazy stuff. We also had TV Ontario, the late Elwy Yost would show more classic Hollywood films. And then, of course, there was just the usual TV, which, even though there were really only 3 channels, you could still manage, if you tried really hard, to see a lot of movies. And I managed to do that and kind of got hooked on it. Toyed with the idea of, especially when I kind of had a adolescent crush on Woody Allen, which you can write your own jokes about, being a director. And then I realized, being a director would mean actually leaving the house. So I'm going to stick to writing. And a few years ago, I made a happenstance comment about Scorsese's King of Comedy in the comments over at Mark Steyn's place. I've known him for many years, and he's known my writing, my blogging. And he said, you should just write a whole column about this. And I did, and, a whole column about a few seconds of a scene from one movie, but it was well received. And since then, I've been doing a weekly Saturday night column on whatever movie I feel like. Because I don't tend to go to see new movies, they tend to be pretty old. And that suits me. New movies are not my thing. So anybody wants to talk about Marvel versus DC or something, you're going to come to the wrong place. I can't tell them apart and have no interest in it whatsoever. I'm a little bit with Scorsese on that one. And so that's sort of how I ended up where I am today, doing the movie column anyway.
You know, it's funny. There's, I see some commonalities there in that I also had a teenage crush on Woody Allen. Although, you know, being well, I mean, not romantic crush, but
No, I get it.
I may
Yeah,
have been the only 15-year-old kid at a high school at Grant Park High School in Winnipeg who was just very rapidly going through Woody's entire catalog
I hear.
on VHS, and I I think I've learned a lot about film and classics I never even heard of through your writing. So thank you for that, for bringing me a level of culture that that I just I hadn't been into, but I find it fascinating. And some of the movies we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about JFK and falling down and the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I have to say, please do, if you're listening, check out Kathy's writing on her movie columns over at Steyn Online, because they go far beyond what, as you were saying. I also I hate the Marvel franchises for the most part. And it's sort of, you always pick out films that have interesting deep cultural relevance that actually, when you write about them, I didn't I don't always catch on the first time, how deep the rabbit hole goes with a lot of these. And so you've trained your brain in a way that I never did.
Well, and being a reader since age 3, I did a lot of reading about movies. And, the Woody Allen thing is funny because Moses Neimer, one of the things he did was, Woody Allen movies, the quote, early funny ones, etc. They were in constant rotation on city TV, and there were a lot of books out at the time about Woody Allen. There was a very big Woody Allen situation going on in around 1976, 77. A book came out called I Dream of Woody. A psychiatrist was having so many of her patients talk about having dreams about Woody Allen that she wrote a book about it. He was on the cover of all the magazines, and he was a real big phenomenon. And so that led me to reading about movies, Pauline Kael, people like that. And I think the reading about movies really helps you to go, okay, this isn't maybe what's just on the surface. If you hear about how this movie was influenced by 6 other ones, then you go check out the 6 other ones, and you find yourself caught in a big loop. But it's kind of a fun loop. And today with TCM, which I couldn't live without, I think a lot of people are out there going, oh, these quote old black and white movies, holy mackerel, this is, why don't we have anything like this now?
Yeah.
For all the freedom we haven't made movies like this or that. Isn't that interesting? And there are younger people, I hate to say young people date, but I'm 56. And I'm glad to know that some of them are now open to anything that's black and white now that TCM has made it cool. And so, I try to get that across in my columns. Not everybody is open to that on the conservative side, but that'll be something that we can talk about as well.
Oh yeah. I think a bit of context here. So on the Mark Steyn on the site, and he's such a prolific guy. He's got books. He's on Fox. He's on the most widely listened to radio conservative radio show, or might be a radio show period in the States.
I think it's period. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, and I'm stupidly forgetting the name of this.
Rush Limbaugh.
Thank you. So, and yeah, Mark is unique in that, in that, there aren't a whole lot of raw meat or red meat, I should say, eating conservatives. who listen to show tunes,
Yes.
love these kinds of classic movies as much as you do, and he's such a cultural, a culturally literate guy who I've learned a lot from his writing as well on these kinds of things. So this ties into the whole topic of this, or the title of this podcast, of the future of culture and politics. There's a reason I actually even sequenced those words that way, culture coming before politics, because there's an idea that that politics is downstream of culture. Culture is the ideas, the habits, philosophies that are set in our minds, that sort of set an agenda, set the framework of what you can even make possible politically. And by politically, we're not talking about parties. Kathy and I are both completely, well, I think it's fair to say completely uninterested in party politics.
Yeah.
And it's more about the ideas of, and I think we're aligned in a lot of ways on the conservative front, which I was, I was leery of identifying myself as a conservative years ago, and I've learned since that is not uncommon at all.
No.
Given the pressures societally and culturally that conservatives are put under. I don't want to get into that too much, because we're gonna, well, maybe I do, but I want to get into the movies fairly quickly. But the whole point of this is let's look at some movies that had they had something to say about where we were as a society. They had something to say culturally, and in some of these cases, maybe the message of the movie, there may have been hidden messages that the audience didn't necessarily pick up on, but you have picked up on in your columns, and so I love that. So I think movies are such a focal point of culture today, that this is it's a great way to show the linkage between how these things I guess cross-pollinate, because it's not entirely a one-way street. But yeah, my contention is, and it's not, I guess, solely my contention, you start with culture, and politics grows out of that. Did you have any thoughts before we get into the movies?
Yeah, and I think, culture is downstream from politics. I mean, I think a really good example, and again, it is kind of complicated. If you want to say politics with a capital P, the really rampant and embarrassing anti-Americanism that we see from a lot of so-called sophisticated Canadians. This is something that is generational, and it's been going on for a really long time. And a lot of it comes from the movies. I'm not saying that, someone with a genuine, well thought out objection to the Vietnam War who lived in Canada, that's something else. I'm talking about people who hate America because they watched Deliverance, or because they watched a whole bunch of movies, which admittedly were made by Americans, often liberal, well, mostly liberal Americans, who gave them a very poisonous idea of what America's like. A lot of these anti-American sophisticates have not been to the United States in a very long time, or have gone to places where they're going to have their prejudices reinforced, I suppose. But so you can see that it's as old as me. I think it goes back a little longer. It's embarrassing, and a lot of it has been fed by movies and television. So if there is a political situation that involves Canada versus the US, how often do we hear about not wanting to engage in American style X? This notion of American style politics or debate or gun law or medicine is, again, not based on any kind of firsthand experience most of the time. it's because, I don't know, they watch Steyn Elsewhere, some hospital show or something. I think it's important that people try to discern the difference between reality and fiction, and that seems laughably obvious. But I've noticed that, and this is, for a lot of Canadians I know on the left, if you push them long enough to ask them where they got X idea about America, or about sometimes many different things, sexuality or uh, politics or ecology, it will come down to a movie they saw. And you have to keep pushing. It's boring. Not everyone is interested, as I am, in excavating that kind of things. I take a perverse fun out of it. They will tell you that Michael Moore told them, or Al Gore told them. And so conservatives, some of whom I call bumpkins, dismiss the very idea of culture with a capital C, to their detriment, do not or refuse to understand this, and don't realize that it is kind of important what's on TV. It is important what is in the movie theater and whatever. And to just go around saying, "Ooh, evil satanic Hollywood, I don't own a TV." Well, good for you. But for the 99% of people out there who do, and whose minds you allegedly want to change, they do. And it would be good if you could be literate on this topic. You don't have to be as in-depth about it as me, but you would be amazed how often in my columns there will be, or elsewhere that I've written, some quote conservative will say, "Well, who cares? It's just a movie. And where's my football game?" And sushi, ooh, it's raw fish. Like, they're sort of embarrassing. And they boast about their lack of sophistication as a badge of honor. And I think this is one of the reasons we're in the situation we're in right now.
Yeah, well, I think I think the last thing I'm going to say before we get into the movies, but I wanted to follow up on that point, is that there's a bit of a confusion even amongst conservatives themselves over what conservatism is. It is, I think there's a misunderstanding. I think it's a misunderstanding that conservatism is essentially about just, it's, how shall I put this? It's saying no to stuff, and for the sake of saying no to stuff. It's about not trying new things, and it's really more about, conservatism. It's in the root of the word to conserve, is to protect, to you see value in what has come before, and you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
And so there are good things, and then and so to contrast that with, I love that Douglas Murray refuses, at least in his most recent talks that I've seen, he doesn't allow leftists to call themselves progressives, because then the opposite of that is regressive. And
Right.
so if you allow them to call themselves a progressive, you've already lost the argument if you were hoping to get into one. So, it's not about saying no to all new things, whether they're good or bad. It's about, looking at what is part of our identity, part of our culture that is worth preserving. There's value there. So let's stop, let's get away from the philosophical, because I probably lost a couple of viewers right there. And just get into JFK, which, let's talk a little bit about what this movie was. We can talk about the context that it came out in, but I think this really ties into a very prominent theme that comes up. The idea of the conspiracy theory is such a part of our culture now, to the point where we can't even talk to each other. There's there's fake news, there's who can you believe. So you eloquently get into a lot of these themes in your column on JFK. Can you tell this is a movie that came out some years ago, so maybe you can remind the audience, when it came out, what was the sort of the context of when it was coming out?
Sure. Well, it came out in the 90s. I'm going to say 97, because it's not right in front of me, but 97, 98.
Mhm.
And this movie was a long time coming. The JFK assassination, Don DeLillo has called it the 7 seconds that broke the back of the American century. It was a very traumatizing event in American history, to put it mildly. Oh, here I am. I'm sorry. It's 1991, and I personally, I realize why I thought 97. It's 91, and so like many Americans, Oliver Stone, the director, writer, was obsessed with it. The Kennedy assassination spawned a lot of conspiracy theory culture, and that has not really gone away. I think it was Robert Fulford who called conspiracy theories history for stupid people. And I really like that. I'm not sure I would say stupid. I would probably say autistic, having a sprinkling of that myself. I think that a lot of people get into conspiracy theories because it allows them to play in video game of their own making. It's a rarefied, hermetically sealed world with particular little chess pieces and players and locations, and they find it pleasurable to move these little pieces around. The problem is that when that obsession spills out into the body politic, we have a very unpleasant it's not really good for society at large. I'm the first one to, being an anarchist at heart, I'm not a big fan of the government. But I think when conspiracy theories really permeate a culture, and they were very in the fore in the 70s, I can tell you. Yes, if you don't have to be crazy to be paranoid and all that stuff. I think that there's a corrosive effect on society as a whole. I think it is polluting, in the same way that, in 3 Mile Island, you can't live there anymore because the ground is polluted with nuclear waste. There comes a point where it starts to kill off goodwill, benefit of the doubt. It hands over your agency to some probably imaginary cabal, which doesn't appeal to me at all. I especially dislike 9/11 truthers, because I think that if you literally believe that the United States government killed 3,000 people that day, you should leave the country, because obviously your life is in danger too. And if you don't leave, then what you're revealing to me is that you're one of those people I was talking about earlier for whom this is a lot of mental masturbation and not at all contributing to society as a whole. So when JFK came out, we had just kind of gotten over the 1970s paranoid cinema craze, and then Oliver Stone decided to drag us all back there, and he posited the entire film is based on probably the dumbest Kennedy assassination theory, and there are many of them. He picked the stupidest, so that's all, a bad one. It's based on the idea by James Garrison, who was a district attorney in New Orleans, that a group of gay men who were sympathetic to the Cuban Revolution killed JFK as part of a homosexual thrill kill. Now, if you think this makes a really stupid idea for a movie, you're absolutely right. Unbelievably, because Oliver Stone is an unquestionably talented man, even on cocaine. He made a magisterial film. The problem is that with a lot of film, and I talk about that in my column that's coming out tonight as well, that when the foundation of the film is this bad, all the beautiful trappings and cinematography and performances and music can only, the beauty of it will become seductive to people, and they will take this theory, as absurd as it is, at face value, and ignore the real life developments that have debunked a lot of the so-called evidence of JFK conspiracy theories. And those
Sorry,
theories, you know,
Kathy.
those, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to interject before. I think I may be quoting or at least paraphrasing Ann Coulter correctly. And for those whose heads just exploded at the mention of Ann Coulter, yeah, the words seem to just drive people up a wall. I think she had a theory that you know, it essentially broke down to Lee Harvey Oswald was a communist.
Yes.
I like communists. I'm a lefty. Therefore, who else we got?
That is literally true. You know, people who have spent a lot more time on this than I have come to that conclusion. For example, there were a couple of I shouldn't say a couple. There were posters on Dallas streets before Kennedy arrived saying, you know, wanted dead or alive. Now, anyone who lives in Toronto had to have lived through Stephen Harper is the devil posters and all kinds of other things, and he's still walking around. Were there a bunch of crazy right-wing people in Dallas at the time? Absolutely. This is Dallas, Texas. It's 1963. Who do you think lives there? But I guess one thing that bothers me is that JFK, which came out in 1991, is the only exposure millions of people will ever voluntarily submit to looking at the various theories and the evidence of what happened and the analysis of the Zapruder film. And one of my points in the column was, you know, without getting too deep in the weeds, a lot of the famous evidence that is in this movie has either since been debunked or was already debunked, and Oliver Stone decided he didn't want to deal with that.
Yeah, I
But
think.
those,
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, in a magazine article that says, you guys, this photo of Lee Harvey Oswald in the backyard, we can put it to rest. It's him. He's got the gun. We have a computer. I have a PhD. Hello. But that's not a 3.5-hour Oscar-nominated movie. It's an article, and that's a problem.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned in the column, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a part of this Zapruder footage, which is I guess the famous footage that's, you know, a bit fuzzy, but everyone's kind of seen it, and everyone thinks it's one seamless reel. But and this is why no one could figure out, well, how could you know, someone have gotten off that many shots with a bolt action rifle in that number of seconds? It's impossible. It must have been multiple shooters. And I think you mentioned in the column that you know, he was taking time to switch up reels, or maybe you can explain.
Yeah, and this should embarrass everyone, including, I guess, me, because it was only about in 2004 that a guy writing for, I believe it was the New York Times, asked the simple question, you know, is the Zapruder film the entirety of the crime? Is it all captured on film? And the answer is no. It has never been a secret that Abraham Zapruder, who was a Dallas Shamata guy, you know, he was ran a dressmakers, and he went down with his camera that he was very proud of. Very rare in those days, boys and girls, to have a giant camera like that, and went down at his lunch hour, and he positioned himself on some little monument there, and he took what turned out to be this is the most photographed crime ever. And yet it remains, quote, unsolved, which is a paradox I find particularly interesting. But he took the film, and it has never been a secret that he got up there with the help of his secretary and started shooting when he saw the motorcycle cops approaching. But, you know, there's a long lineup of everybody and their grandma wanted to be in this motorcade. So after a little bit, and he was having trouble steadying himself on this monument, he stopped the camera, and then he restarted the camera when it was apparent that the president's limousine was rounding the corner onto Elm. And this is not a secret. It's in the Warren report. He had no reason to think that that was a strange thing not to tell people. Everybody knew it. But because it's just not as good a story, I guess, I don't know, or our brains can't, it's too messy. People for generations just assumed that they were looking at the entirety of the crime, and because it's 6 seconds long and you can't operate a bolt action rifle in 6 seconds to get 3 shots on. A guy named Max Holland said, look, what if the first shot happened before he hit the button on his camera? And everyone, the brain went, oh, because now the film matters and doesn't matter now. And he's assembled a very, believable proof that it's based on everything from eyewitnesses at the time to photographs to everything. People kind of knew all this, but Life magazine didn't like that story because they had the rights to the Zapruder film and wanted everyone to think that they had everything, and it's all very complicated. But yeah, so if you throw out the idea that the film is the crime, then I'm 50 now, so almost 60 years of conspiracy theory, just the work of thousands of people, it evaporates, because once that domino falls, all the other proofs are proof of nothing. They are unnecessary. A lot of these conspiracies don't matter now because one guy could have done it, and you're screwed.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have a lot invested in this as a pseudo-religious event, and I understand that, believe me. But I think that the Kennedy assassination conspiracy theory world mindset has been extremely unhealthy for America and for the rest of the world. And I think we will not, it'll take many generations for us to outgrow this, because I think even when we aren't thinking about it, we're thinking about it.
Yeah, well, I think, I feel like a lot of the solution to this, it sounds really simple, but I wish journalists would be journalists. And,
Yeah.
and
Instead of what they are, which is basically social workers who don't want to get their hands dirty, I think. Like, they want to fix something. They don't want to report something. They want to fix, and fix is one step away from create.
right. It's the, okay, what's the agenda I want to put out? Okay, now where do I find the facts to support this premise? So, and that's so much of how journalism is done today. That's a whole other topic, and we don't have time to cover that. So we're about to get into falling down, but I think that JFK is, it's such a great example of how, politics is downstream from culture, and in that, at the very least, a profit motive was cemented in the minds of not just Hollywood, but anyone with a camcorder who subsequently decided to get into the movies somehow, or TV, or any kind of an artist. It's like hey, it's the old line, you don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. Again, this is great for storytelling, not so good for things that pose themselves as documentaries that people are going to, take their talking points from.
And, a bit like Michael Moore, who puts his, I'm just asking questions, or, or comedians who say, I'm just a comedian, they take the little hat on and off when it suits them, Oliver Stone would at times say, I'm just like Shakespeare. He manipulated history, but in other interviews, he would say, no, what I'm presenting is the truth. And if I can, just for 1 second, anybody out there who's really interested in the whole phenomenon of, how a piece of video like the Rodney King video and things like that, this whole world that we're living in now, I highly recommend that they seek out a book by Abraham Zapruder's granddaughter. It's not a stupid vanity publishing book, by the way. It's from a major house and it won some awards. And it is a fascinating look at the first man for whom this was a situation. There was no Rodney King video. There was no video in those days. And to watch how he was, and his film became what it became, and how Dan Rather almost beat him up, by the way, to try to steal the footage. He's a real prince.
What?
I've
never heard that.
Oh, in this book, you will learn many things, or have reconfirmed many things about the way the media works, about the way our minds work when it comes to what we see versus what happened, and how one man, through no fault of his own, sort of got caught up in, what has been called the crime of the century. And it's beautifully written, and it's a must for anybody who's interested in media history. I can't recommend it enough.
Well, we could again have a whole other episode just on this movie, but let's move on to Falling Down, which I remember seeing in the theaters, and so this is there's so many themes that are going on here. There's sort of a callback here to what you were talking about near the beginning of this chat, where we were talking about how a lot of it's not so much a pro-liberal or pro-lefty view that Hollywood is trying to put out as an anti-American one. And you've got in this film, I'll let you do the hard work, but from what I recall, it's essentially the story of a smart older white guy.
That's right.
Works for the Defense Department. He has used his brain to try to help keep America safe. And at the end of the Cold War, they pretty much tell him to clear out his desk, and you're no longer needed. And he has a bit of a breakdown. Now, I'll let you sort of take it from there. From what was going on at the time that this movie came out. That what was this movie trying to say? What was its context? Take it away.
Well, it came out in 1993 during the Clinton administration, and there were a lot of budget cuts to the military, as you know, and won't be surprised to learn, because it was a Democratic administration. And this movie is so eerily prescient, because how often do we now hear on Twitter people going, oh, white man's tears, and okay boomer, and well, in 1993, the whole, and I'll just put it this way, it sounds a little alt-right, it is not my view, but the whole kind of, are white people dying out, kind of, you would not believe it if you didn't see this movie, but that was actually a kind of a theme of this. Here's a guy who, as he says himself, and it has Michael Douglas in it, and he's very much like his old man in this movie. And in a wonderful line reading at the very end, he says, "I'm the bad guy." And the idea is that this guy worked for the Defense Department, and he's a white collar guy, so he was doing a lot of the computing and so forth and so on. And he's laid off because it's the 90s. don't you know, we don't need all this stuff anymore. There's going to be peace and love in the world, and everything's groovy now. And so, like a lot of men who lose his job, he continues to sort of pretend to commute to the job every day. And one day he gets caught in one of those inevitable LA traffic jams. It's the hottest day of the year, et cetera, et cetera. And he abandons his car and he decides he's going to walk home. And what ensues is this kind of Wizard of Oz meets The Swimmer meets, before, you know, Tarantino was still working at the video store when this thing came out. Tarantino-esque, before there was a Tarantino guy trip to his quote home, which we later learn is not his home. He's separated from his wife and child because he is a very angry, he's an angry white man with a brush cut. You know, he's that guy. Everybody here knows who I'm talking about, I think. You know, that guy, he's in a lot of movies, but he's not in a lot of movies like this one. So he's walking along, he's walking through LA, and LA is, as it was, you know, was then. It's, quote, multicultural. So he runs into a Korean shopkeeper and a bunch of black gangbangers and this and that. And in an almost cartoonish fashion. And this is high satire. You know, this really is almost cartoonish satire, but for a reason. It's kind of like a graphic novel, I guess, where, you know, you've got to just sketch stuff out. And he goes on this journey, and he, quite by happenstance at first, starts picking up weapons. He scares a bunch of gangbangers and they drop their guns, so he picks them up. Well, they come in handy, and then he ends up going over here and he picks up some more guns. And so, you know, at one level, this is almost like a video game, which a lot of people pointed out we're just starting up in those days. And it's almost like a real life video game where his task is to get home. And he doesn't really make it, as you can probably guess. But, you know, it was done at a time during a massive recession. A lot of people were getting laid off. And one of the themes of this film is just that, you know, life is pointless, that there is no work. No wonder these kids are gangbangers. What do you want them to do? There's a wonderful scene where a black man who happens to be dressed exactly like our protagonist has been denied a bank loan and is protesting outside the bank. And he's the one who gets arrested, not our white protagonist, which is also very interesting. It was hitting everybody. And this is one of those movies that in a lot of ways owes a lot to 1970s films like Death Wish. The 70s, the economy was a lot worse. And there were a lot of I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take it anymore movies about a lone man who cannot handle the crime, the filth, the joblessness, the inflation, the Vietnam War, et cetera, et cetera. And you might say, well, but this is the 90s. Couldn't have been as bad. But, you know, when you're in it, it seems pretty bad. And it seemed pretty bad to this guy. And I think it was such a brave movie for everybody involved to put out. And it was so prescient that after it came out, a lot of the people involved kind of didn't have the courage of their convictions. I've heard Michael Douglas say, oh, well, this guy, yeah, that character, I mean, he was just a racist. And the director say something similar, and the screenwriter say something similar. And you can detect in the way they're saying it that they sort of feel they have to say it. I think when they were making the movie, they were a lot ballsier. And the whole idea is, you know what? This isn't some crazy Klansman. In fact, he encounters a crazy Klansman and, spoiler alert, blows the guy's brains out. That's not who this guy is. He's a probably high IQ, but otherwise ordinary guy who, like he said, he went to school, got a good job, got married. He did, quote, all the right things. And one day it just evaporated, and they asked, how would a person like that react? And they made a movie about it. And when millions of people went to see this and said, holy mackerel, I really identify with this guy, they went, oh, which is too bad for them, because I think they made a flawed masterpiece. If you want to know what the 1990s were about, I don't mean 1990s movies, I mean the 90s, you have to see this movie because it is 2 hours of the 90s. It's just, the concept is perfect. The people you meet are right there. And you can get a pretty good idea of what it was like for an adult anyway. If you watch this movie, it's one of the key films of the 90s. I'm not saying it's a great movie, but you have to see it.
I thought it was pretty good.
Yep. Well, I think a lot of times, people will look back on this and they look at it through our eyes and go, well, but yeah, it looks a little this, it looks a little that. It is hard for a lot of people, even me, to watch 1970s films without going, what the hell are they wearing?
Yeah, yeah.
But
and I think it's also the kind of film that let's say if Oliver Stone or another writer decided, or another filmmaker decided to take another run at JFK, I think they could kind of do that with a similar script to what they did years ago, and it'd probably be received even better than it was back then. But I don't think they could make Falling Down today.
no, I fight with a lot of people over what couldn't be made today. For instance, I hate the Blazing Saddles could never be made today thing. Look at any Wayans Brothers films and tell me that is not Blazing Saddles, if not more so. It's just lazy. But yes, this movie, if someone tried to make it, no, they couldn't make it, and it's too bad. And so again, that's another reason to watch it. If you want a really good example of a movie you couldn't make, this is actually a true example of that. And so just, even if you want to look at it as a curio, and I don't think you could. He would have, spoiler, dies at the end. And of course he dies, would die at the end, but he could not be the protagonist of this film, because he's an old white guy and they have to go.
Yeah. And so that's, I think that you have very eloquently covered Falling Down's themes and, how they relate again to what we're seeing today with, political correctness and racism is everywhere and all the rest of it.
And let's face it, with the coronavirus, people out of work. I mean, you could make a movie like this. You could, I suppose, and have him go and find that the doors are locked at X restaurant and trying to get back home. People have to accept it as kind of a satirical fable as well. And I think one of the problems with Falling Down is that a lot of people didn't see it that way and thought it was a prescription for behavior. And which was very similar to Death Wish. And in the 70s, I can tell you, is that many people said, well, this is telling us to go around shooting people. And it is more complicated that it was a way of saying, look, this is how people feel, and maybe we should do something about it before this becomes real.
Yes.
And, but we never do.
Okay. So we're gonna go take a little bit of a time machine now into a bit of a different era, because I think the Rocky Horror Picture Show predated Falling Down and JFK by a number of years, actually.
Oh yes, it's 75.
Yeah, and so
is it ever?
So yeah, I remember I've seen the film, but I think I've seen it and seen parts of it at various times. And honestly, the first couple times I saw it, I literally didn't know what I was watching. What is this? And
Right.
and I guess that's kind of the fun of it. That's the fun of the movie is it's kind of all over the place. It's a comedy. But you know what? You're going to do a way better job of providing the context and describing exactly what it is. But it's not just a movie. It's a phenomenon. It's a cultural phenomenon, and it
Right.
had that. I thought your column was interesting, and it pointed out, what people were seeing, and the conclusions that they were drawing from it or the inspirations that were coming from it may have been actually the opposite of what was intended. But
Right.
I'll let you get into all of that. Can you tell us a little bit about the Rocky Horror Picture Show?
Well, I feel the first thing I have to say about the Rocky Horror Picture Show is that it is not a very good movie. What made it what it is was that people used this film as a backdrop for their own behavior. So it became one of the first midnight movies, as we called them when there were things like movie theaters and rep houses, where stuff that kind of didn't get picked up by the mainstream, like Harold and Maude and things like that, would be shown at midnight for, by the way, profit reasons. I mean, if you can keep your movie theater open for one more showing, why not, And so savvy guys in New York, where people like this or people are going to do stuff like this, would have midnight screenings. But Rocky Horror was, like a lot of these films, a movie that died at the box office. I have seen it performed on stage and is much more effective as a piece of theater. But that doesn't mean it makes a good movie, and it kind of didn't. So it went down the toilet and it became a midnight movie, but it became participatory. So after a while, this sort of lore and codified gestures and call and response sort of picked up, and it became ritualistic. People would dress up as the characters. I mean, folks do cosplay now, but this was, it's not the first cosplay, because Ackerman actually invented cosplay for science fiction conferences, but this was sort of ordinary people cosplay. Before that was a word. You'd dress up as the characters, you'd sing along. You do things like insult the characters. They insult each other throughout the movie. There is a kind of a weird community of bitchiness in it. There is not a lot of wholesomeness going on at all, either on the screen or in the audience, and I've been in the audience, and it's a little bit like the future posing community in the gay world. It's very performative, and it probably inspired a lot of that. So it's about, I mean, it's kind of stupid, but it's about this guy named Dr. Frankenfurter, and he comes from another planet, and he lives in this castle with his other weirdo friends who are all kind of like omnisexual and in drag or not or whatever. And these two innocents arrive, Brad and Janet, and they knock on the door. It's raining, their car broke down. Can they come in? Oh, of course you can come in. And then they get seduced into this extremely, decadent Weimar gay, drugged out world in the castle. None of that really matters that much. The songs are fun. It's daring. It's weird. For a lot of gay people, I think it was a wonderful, oh, this is kind of a world that I recognize, sort of. I've heard a lot of gay people say, oh, this was my first gay movie. But what's interesting about it is that, like, well, almost every movie, and Falling Down is like this too. It's all fun and games until the guy does die at the end. And in Rocky Horror Picture Show, everybody is having someone's idea of a wonderful time, having these orgies and so on. But at the end, it ends. And the star, the lead character, is scolded for letting this party get out of hand. And he gets kind of zapped, really. He's going home to his home planet, and he will be punished for going too far. But what most people take out of the Rocky Horror Picture Show is the first 90 minutes. I think that's true of a lot of movies like Goodfellas too. Makes it makes it look, being a gangster, look so awesome, and then you forget the part where they all end up in jail at the end. Your brain doesn't want to remember that part. It wants to remember the fun part with the great soundtrack. And so people have, I don't want to say based their lives on Rocky Horror Picture Show, but the message in the film is don't dream it, be it. Be your quote self, dress up crazy, be gay, be bi, be trans, be all these different things. Whatever you do, don't be straight, because that's boring. And then in the last few seconds, there's like a little coda, which nobody made them do, by the way. This is not a studio film, where it's like, okay, this is enough is enough. This is actually kind of a stupid way to live, and we better stop. And and I always remembered the ending. That's why I'm a boring conservative. But it's not that unusual, because if you look at something as wonderful as Hedwig and the Angry Inch, which is 20 years later and very similar, at the end, proud, out, gay, trans, whatever he is, Hedwig becomes a man again. At the end of the film, he takes off his drag. He is totally himself. He's completely naked. He's male, and he walks into the darkness. He rejects the first 90 minutes of the movie and the wonderfulness of trans.
I've
But
got to say,
no one made him do that either. No one's going to make the guy who did Hedwig and the Angry Inch do that either. Now, why did those people put that at the end of their movie? If Jack Warner didn't tell them in 1952, you better tack on a happy ending, or they better get punished at the end. No, why did they do that? I wonder why they did that. I'd like to ask them. I think it says a lot about maybe not always believing what you say.
Well, going back to the idea before of could they make this movie today, I think maybe a more interesting question is, or an idea is they absolutely could and would make this movie, but they would just cut off the last minute or two.
Oh, there was a live performance of this about 6 months ago. Very star-studded, or at least what passed for stars today. I'm afraid that being a conservative, I don't keep up with all these folks. But a Black woman, I want to say obviously, played Frankenfurter this time around. And you know what? We don't need to have this performed, because we live it all the time now. So the novelty has not only worn off, it's become kind of mainstream. And a lot of people watched it and went, oh, because they can see that out their window anyway. I mean, when we have drag queen story hour for children, why do we need Rocky Horror?
This is
now it's every day.
yeah.
It's not Saturday night anymore for a couple hours with me and my friends. It's every day or else.
Yes.
You better like it.
It's very interesting. I mean, this ties into what I've heard Douglas Murray talking about, and I read The Madness of Crowds, where he's talking about this train that people are riding on to get to a place. Their destination is equality before the law, not equity, equality. And so you've got different segments of humanity that maybe had been persecuted in the past and faced discrimination. Certainly, of course, some of that still happens, but we reach a point, and I'm not quite sure where it is. Maybe you have an idea. In the recent past, where things pretty much got a lot better. Maybe it was the moment gay marriage happened, but it was where the train kept on going, and nobody wants to put the brakes on. That it's like, obviously progress is good, so let's just keep going. Let's keep pushing this, and so we've wound up in a bit of a strange place where the search is not for equality, it's for as Murray has put it, it's not just good to be gay, maybe it's a little bit better.
Yes, and or else, soon it will be mandatory or whatever. Yes. And I mean, I think we have to realize that there are billions of dollars invested in, quote, progressivism, and it has to be spent on something. And I think even more importantly, frankly, many people are psychologically and emotionally invested in a cause. And you know, when I was kind of on the left, although it was kind of a weird kind of left, a very anarchist left, um, and we wanted to abolish nuclear weapons, I used to say at meetings, our job should be to put ourselves out of business. We should
Mm.
never, we should hope for the day when we do not have to exist. And I cannot convey to you over a microphone the looks on people's faces. I cannot tell you how shocked and frankly saddened they were when the Berlin Wall fell down. Even though we were neither East nor West anarchists who wanted the Berlin Wall to fall down, the minute it fell down, we suddenly realized that we had no jobs and no RSPs and had been banking on there not being a future, even though we were campaigning for a future. And suddenly we had to face that.
Mm.
And I think that once you get the impossible, gay marriage, there is already billions of dollars in places we cannot even begin to understand that are invested in the next thing. You know, when you work at the government, the old thing is you have to spend your budget by the end of the year, and you buy, you know, 8,000 staplers, because if you don't, you won't get more money next year. And the same mentality operates among progressives. There's also a hugely, and this is politics and culture, okay? There is a huge envy that Canadians have for American history, and that perhaps younger generations have for older generations. I grew up, and I don't object to this at all. I'm grateful for it. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, hearing about Martin Luther King and the anti-Vietnam War movement. And these things are, by the very nature of photographing them and putting them in Life magazine and making movies about them, are put into a proscenium arch and are glamorized. And nobody wants to grow up and look around and go, well, where's my glamour? Where's my Canadians are the absolute worst for actually envying America. It's extraordinarily violent and awful history of slavery and lynching and blah, blah. Secretly, deep down inside, most Canadian progressives wish Canada was that bad so that they could have something to complain about. It's glamorous. I can tell you that the very act of just walking down Yonge Street on the road, because you're marching with 10,000 people towards City Hall to commemorate the bombing of Nagasaki. For a little piddly Canadian, walking on the street where the cars usually are, it's exhilarating shit. Imagine how exciting it is to, you know, be really involved in some kind of movement. People are trying to bring Black Lives Matter to Canada. We were the destination of the Underground Railroad, not the starting point. But we have to have it. And when we glamorize stuff, and we cannot help but glamorize it because that's who we are, we have to understand that once that is out there, it cannot be brought back in. And now everybody wants to be Rosa Parks. I want to be the Rosa Parks of the trans bathroom. I want to be the, you know, no, stop. But think, it's, you know, I'm Catholic. And every Easter we have to go to Mass, and one of the things we have to do is renew our baptismal vows. And one of the things we say, and these are very ancient words, are, I reject the glamour of evil. I'm not saying that the civil rights movement was evil, but I am saying that we always have to be on the lookout for glamour, because glamour is what will lead us down a wrong path. And glamour is what movies are about, and what culture is often about. And we have to be aware of that in ourselves. Are we really following a cause, or are we following a picture of a cause that we have in our head that was put there by someone else?
Well, on that note, I can't possibly summarize up in a better way than you just did the connection between culture and politics, and how these trends, particularly in film, are still influencing us today. We could keep talking for a long time, but I'm cognizant you've already been very generous with your time, and I hope to not just leave the audience always wanting more, but hopefully you will agree to at some point come on the show again, and we can delve deep into another topic.
Of course, I'd love to. I feel like we could probably go on another hour and it would be fine. And, I'm having fun. So anytime.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Kathy. And Kathy Shaidle, who is a movie columnist over at Steyn Online. If people wanted to find out about you and your work and learn more, well, read your columns, obviously. Where can they find you online?
Yeah, you just go to steynonline.com, and every Saturday, usually about 6, I have a new movie column up, unless I don't because I'm doing chemo or something. But normally that's where you'll find me on Saturday. And I don't know when this is going to air, as we old people say, but my next one is about Network, which is a perfect movie to watch after you listen to this podcast.
Well, I can guarantee you this is going to go up very fast. In fact, on the podcast, it may not go up immediately, but on YouTube, it'll go up almost right away. And the reason I do that is, as you learned earlier, when I completely muffed our appointment timing.
Oh, no problem.
I'm a bit of a disorganized guy, so I prefer to get these things pushed live to the site before I have a chance to lose them. So
Awesome.
this should go up, I think, but latest by Monday. But I'll share it. And yeah, please do, if you're listening, please do check out Kathy's writing. I love it, and I've learned a lot, and I know that you will too. So thank you very much. You've been listening. Thank you very much, Kathy. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
And to our audience, you have been listening to The Future of Culture and Politics. I am your host, Jonathon Narvey, and I will see you sometime in the future.